My name is Rachel. I'm 32 years old and live in a small town about a 50-minute drive from Chicago. Every morning I make myself a cup of coffee, check the weather forecast, then walk to my office just over a block away from home. I'm the co-founder of a biotech startup in the healthcare field, a job that's not easy to explain, especially to people who think office work just means typing data all day. My family never understood what I do, or maybe they never really wanted to. To them, I've always been the odd younger sister, the one who dressed plainly, never wore much makeup, and was always stuck to her laptop or in some meeting. Emma, my older sister, is the one they're proud of. She's 3 years older than me and has always been the perfect daughter in their eyes. Beautiful, elegant, soft-spoken, and charming. Even in family photos, I was just a faint shadow behind Emma's spotlight. On Thanksgiving or Christmas, relatives would gather around her with praise. "Emma, you look gorgeous in that dress." Or, "Emma, your new boyfriend's a doctor. Impressive." And me? If anyone even remembered I existed, the line was always, "Rachel, yeah, she's doing something in biotech." I think they spoke as if I were a footnote at the bottom of the page. I used to think if I worked hard enough, if I stayed behind the scenes and carried the load, then one day my parents would finally see me and be proud, just like they were of Emma. But no, all the attention, all the expectations, all the compliments. They were always hers, and me, I was always distant, dry, hard to talk to. They never knew I'd stayed at the office until midnight, handling a crisis for a public health project worth nearly $2 million. They never asked how it felt to build a company from scratch with 3 college friends. When people ask about my family, I just give a faint smile and say, "We haven't spoken in a while, it's nothing." Not because I'm hiding something, just because there's nothing left to say. We haven't talked in over 2 years. No texts, no calls, no birthday wishes, just silence like a broken line. Nobody bothered to reconnect. I used to believe family was the place you could always return to. But one day, on my mother's birthday, that belief shattered. It was late March. I had just closed a successful funding round with an investment firm from New York. I planned to take 3 days off and fly back early to help my parents prep for Mom's birthday like I always did. Nothing fancy, I just wanted to help out like always. When I called to let them know, it was my dad who picked up. "I'm planning to come back early. Let me know if there's anything you need me to pick up or prepare," I said. I still remember his voice. Not angry, just strange. A short pause, then he cleared his throat. "Rachel, if possible, don't come home this year." I froze for a second, thinking maybe he was worried I was too busy with work. "It's okay, Dad. I've already cleared my schedule. I really want to be there." This time his voice was firm. "Emma is bringing her new boyfriend. He's a CFO. Well-spoken, clearly successful. Your job? Well, it's hard to explain. You showing up would just invite comparisons and make things awkward, so it's best you stay." I went numb, my chest tightened, a cold sting crawling down my spine. I gripped the phone and said through clenched teeth, "Are you saying I make the family look bad? That I shouldn't come home because I'm an embarrassment?" He didn't take it back. In fact, he doubled down. "If you insist on coming, then don't call me your father." Then he hung up. No hesitation, no second thoughts. My apartment went eerily quiet. The coffee cup in my hand had gone cold. I stared into the empty air like the world had cracked open with a single sentence. I didn't cry. I just sat there. And for the first time in my life, I realized something. I was no longer part of the family I had tried so hard to hold together. I sat there in my familiar armchair by the window, early spring sunlight pouring through the white curtains, unable to warm the chill inside me. My father's words echoed again, clear and final. "If you insist on coming, then don't call me your father." I looked down at my hands. My fingers trembled, not from anger, but from something deeper. The breaking point. I had always thought that even if I'd never be loved like Emma, at least I was still their daughter. Turns out I wasn't. I stood up and walked to my desk. Without hesitation, I opened my laptop and logged into my banking app. For over 2 years, I'd been sending money to my parents every month. covering their electric bill, water, internet, even cable. Nearly $600 a month, not counting the extra I'd send when Mom said the fridge broke down or Dad's car needed work. They never asked if I could afford it. They just said, "Emma's struggling after switching jobs. If you can help, that'd be great." And I helped, quietly, as if it were my duty. As if responsibility were some invisible contract I'd signed the moment I started earning. I opened the transaction history and scrolled. The total popped up. $15,720. My heart sank. Not because I regretted it, but because even after all of that, I was never enough. I hovered over each bill. Electric, water, internet, click, then another. Notifications popped up. Auto payment canceled successfully. No alarms, no warnings, just silence. Just like how I'd always existed in my family. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was angry, but because I kept thinking about how everything unfolded, about what my father said, about how my entire family was willing to cast me aside just to impress Emma's new boyfriend, a man I hadn't even met. I'd been compared all my life, but this was the first time I was publicly rejected, as if my existence was an inconvenience. Mom's birthday came quickly. I didn't call, I didn't send a card, I didn't post anything online, not out of spite, but because I couldn't pretend anymore. At exactly 5 p.m., as I sat on my balcony sipping peppermint tea, my phone buzzed. It was my mom. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then let it go dark. A message came in right after. "Rachel, why is the power out? Can you check for us?" I set down my tea and opened the next message from Dad. "No water, no internet. Call the providers. Your mom's freaking out." I sat in silence, eyes fixed on the tree line out back. No anger, no pain, just an eerie calm. They didn't ask, "Are you okay?" Not a word about the phone call. They just wanted me to do what I'd always done. Clean up the mess. Then came a text from Emma. "The internet's down, guests are coming, and Mom is almost in tears. What's going on?" I picked up my phone and typed, "3 weeks ago, Dad told me if I insisted on coming home, I shouldn't call him my father. I'm just doing what he asked. If this is inconvenient, maybe find someone you're not ashamed to introduce." I didn't send it. I deleted it. Not because I regretted it, but because I knew no matter what I said, they'd only hear what suited them. I set the phone down, leaned back in my chair, and closed my eyes. My little apartment was still and quiet. No complaints, no judgmental looks, no demands. The next day, Emma left a voicemail. "Mom's been crying since last night. Do you know how important yesterday was? My boyfriend met the family for the first time, and everything got ruined. You're so selfish." I listened to the whole message, then turned off my phone. For years, I hadn't been selfish enough. Now it was time. I opened my work email and checked the weekend operations report. One subject line stood out. "New Jersey staff transfer to Chicago. Awaiting approval." I opened the attached list, skimmed through the names, and then I stopped. Ryan Peterson. That name made my heart skip a beat. I remembered it because just 3 days ago, my mother had mentioned it. Emma's boyfriend, Ryan, works at a major corporation. I squinted at the file. Current position, head of finance, New Jersey branch, transferring to Chicago HQ. Approver, Rachel Wilson, co-founder. I let out a small laugh, just a reflex. The world was smaller than I thought, and I knew what was coming had only just begun. I sat still in front of my laptop, hand resting on the mouse, my chest hollow as if someone had taken a piece of my memory I'd clung to for too long, nearly $16,000, every cent of it paid by me month after month without reminders, without delays. And yet, not once had they said, "Thank you." Not once. I scrolled back through the payment list, the same lines repeating. $192.48 my electricity. $136.72 my water. $248.50 my internet and cable. Month after month, like I was their unpaid family accountant. Unseen, unacknowledged, forgotten. I remembered the last phone call with my mom about a year ago, when she called around midnight just to say, "Rachel, the bathroom pipe burst. Can you call someone? Emma's on vacation with her boyfriend. You're the only one left. You're the only one left." It sounded harmless, but it was a bitter truth. I wasn't loved like a daughter. I was just the solution when the ones they truly cared about didn't show up. And now, being told not to come home because my presence didn't look good, I finally understood. All these years, nothing I did was ever received with love. I was only remembered when a bill needed paying or a problem needed fixing. But when I needed something, no one was there. My phone lit up again. A message from my mom. "Rachel, I know yesterday got a little tense, but if you could take care of the internet bill, that would be great. Emma is trying to keep things calm with the guests." I stared at the message like an outsider. No apology, no mention of the cruel rejection from my father. Just another request, like always. I set the phone down without replying. I stepped outside onto the porch, sitting in the wooden chair under the fading April sun. Chicago wasn't warm yet, but the crisp air somehow made me feel clearer. I thought about Ryan, Emma's new boyfriend, and now my incoming employee. The irony. My family excluded me from Mom's birthday because of him, while he was about to report directly to me. If life were a comedy, this would be its finest punchline. I returned to my desk and opened the email. The subject line stood out. "New hire confirmation. Ryan Peterson transfer to Chicago office." I clicked on the profile. Everything matched. Age, experience, degrees, a polished resume. Exactly the kind Emma would go for. Educated, established, charming on paper. I looked at the attached photo. Something familiar. Then I remembered we'd briefly met at a conference about 6 months ago. He shook my hand and politely called me co-founder Wilson. But neither of us made the connection. Or rather, I never cared enough about Emma to know who the man beside her was. Now I had a choice. Approve the transfer or deny it. But I knew I didn't need to do anything. Life had already written the perfect script. I just needed to sit back and see what would happen when Emma found out. Her boyfriend reported to the sister who embarrassed the family. The next day, Ryan arrived at the office. He stepped into mine with a folder, his face slightly tense. When I looked up, his eyes paused on me, then widened in shock. "Rachel?" he asked softly. I smiled faintly, calm and composed. "Welcome to Atlantic Genomics. I'll be reviewing the entire financial plan for this quarter. I look forward to working with you." Ryan froze. His face flushed, then turned pale. No one in my family knew I co-founded this company. No one had ever asked what I really did. They just assumed I was some low-level desk worker. I said nothing more, just slid the contract toward him. Ryan took it and quietly left the room. I leaned back in my chair. I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. I just felt like the wheel had finally turned. And this time, I didn't have to say a word. The truth had spoken for itself. The morning of my mother's birthday, the Chicago sky was unusually gray. A thick fog hung in the air, making everything look blurred, like the world itself was bracing for something to unravel. I poured myself a strong black coffee, sat by the window, and stared at the empty yard. I didn't plan to do anything. No texts, no calls, no birthday post. I just wanted things to play out exactly as they were, without me. At 9 a.m., as my phone buzzed. First message from Mom. "Rachel, sweetheart, I think the power's out. Can you check for us? It's an important day." I placed the phone face down on the table. Same tone, sweet, gentle, like nothing had ever happened. Like I hadn't been told by my father that I embarrassed the family and shouldn't show up. 15 minutes later, a second message. This time from Dad. "Still no power. Water's not running either. Is something wrong with the payments? Call the provider now." Short, cold, no concern, no mention of me being excluded from the party. Just a command like I was still their logistics manager. I sighed. For 2 years, I'd never missed a single payment. electricity, water, internet, cable. I canceled them all one by one the night my father hung up and severed everything because I was hard to introduce. And now, on the very day Emma was introducing her boyfriend to the family, the house was in chaos. No electricity, no water, no internet. Exactly as expected. By 11 a.m., the messages came flooding in. Mom, Rachel, please, I'm begging you. Guests are arriving. Can you just help this once? Dad, no electricity. We can't cook. Where are you? Take care of this now. Emma, seriously, Rachel, today is special. Mom's about to cry. There's no internet. I can't call anyone. I'm losing it here. Can you stop being selfish? I leaned back. My coffee had gone cold. The texts didn't make me feel vindicated. They didn't satisfy me. All I felt was emptiness. A quiet, unwavering emptiness. Then the phone buzzed again. A video call from Aunt Sarah, the only person in the family who still sent holiday messages, even if I rarely responded. I hesitated, then answered. Her old kitchen came into view, lit only by a phone flashlight. She looked tired, eyes slightly red. Rachel, she said softly, your mom's in a panic. The house is dark. Everyone's running around and no one knows what to do. I said nothing, just looked at her. She paused, then added, not accusing, not defending. What happened? You've never missed your mom's birthday. I know you have your reasons, but say something. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. My dad said I made the family look bad. Told me if I insisted on coming, I shouldn't call him my father anymore. What do you think I should do after that? Aunt Sarah froze. Her face changed in an instant. In the background, I heard noise. My mother saying loudly, she's probably just sulking. No one would be heartless enough to do this. Then a sharper voice. Emma, Ryan's almost here. Someone called the power company already? I can't believe she did this to us today. I gave a slight, joyless smile. Aunt Sarah heard everything. She didn't defend anyone, didn't say a word, and then unexpectedly the screen shifted. A new face entered the frame. Ryan, same neat suit, same polished expression as in his resume. He stared at the screen and blurted out almost involuntarily, Rachel. Everyone went silent. You're Rachel Wilson, the one who runs Atlantic Genomics. I nodded, eyes steady. A long pause. Then Ryan turned to everyone in the room. She's my direct superior and the one who approved my transfer to Chicago. Stunned silence. Emma's jaw dropped. My parents froze. No one said a word. I calmly replied, hope your introduction today goes well. Then I ended the call. After the call, I set my phone down without another word. Outside the window, the dim afternoon light filtered weakly through the thick gray clouds. Everything around me was so quiet it barely felt real. No voices, no follow-up texts, no calls. Just me and a strange, weightless sense of relief. After a truth revealed not by me, but by them. I didn't need to expose anyone. I just stayed silent and let everything unfold exactly as it was meant to. Ryan had confirmed it clearly. I was his superior, the co-founder of Atlantic Genomics, the company they assumed I was just some desk worker for. In that moment, my family's kitchen became a stage where the masks fell one by one, and no one could stop them. Aunt Emma, my sister, the one who once whispered to Mom that Rachel should pick a job that's easier to introduce, now stood frozen beside a birthday cake that hadn't even been lit. She had tried so hard to impress her boyfriend with empty compliments and a picture-perfect family. But in the end, it was that very boyfriend who called me boss in front of everyone. I could picture the scene like I was watching a replay. My mother, so flustered she nearly dropped the cake tray. My father, red-faced, gripping the edge of the table. And the relatives, those who only showed up for food and judgment, sitting in stunned silence, eyes darting around as they tried to process what just happened. And Aunt Sarah still had the call going, her gaze no longer curious, but something closer to respect. She didn't say much, just gave me a small nod before ending the call. That evening, I got the first message from Emma. Long, messy, a mix of anger and desperation. You knew all along, didn't you? You let it happen right during the party. Mom's been crying all night. Ryan doesn't even know how to react. Don't you think that was cruel, Rachel? I watched the message pop up on my screen but didn't open it right away. I made a cup of ginger tea and sat on the couch, letting the steam ease the tightness in my throat. I didn't feel joy, but I didn't feel guilty either. After about 10 minutes, I finally hit reply. Just a few lines. No need for more. You say I was cruel? I was just at home. I didn't start the video call. I didn't call myself his boss. I didn't do anything. And if a single truth was enough to ruin the whole party, maybe that party was never built on anything solid in the first place. I hit send. I wasn't waiting for a reply. Half an hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my mom. The message was short. I never expected you to choose this way to get back at the family. I closed my eyes and leaned back in my chair. Get back? Is that what they thought this was? I just remembered being shut out of a family event, having my role as a daughter dismissed because my job wasn't impressive enough. I remembered quietly paying dozens of bills over 2 years without a single check-in. I remembered trying so hard to be accepted, to be loved. And now I was done trying. Around 10 p.m., I got an email from Ryan. Rachel, I'm sorry I didn't know sooner. I truly respect you for your work and for the way you stayed silent today. I've never felt more ashamed, but not because of you. I read it, then replied slowly. Ryan, you don't need to apologize. Everyone is responsible for how they choose to see others. And don't worry, I never bring family matters into work, but I hope you understand now. Sometimes silence is the greatest strength. I clicked send, turned off my screen, and placed the phone face down on the table. Tomorrow, I'd still go to the office like usual. There would be reports to review, meetings to prepare for, and a world still turning outside. Only now there was one difference. Starting today, they, the ones who once dismissed me, finally knew who I was. And without a single shout, without any accusations, I had made them go silent. The next morning, as I walked into my office, sunlight filtered through the glass panels, casting a warm golden glow across the room. The air was calm, as if the universe had given me a few quiet minutes to breathe before the day's noise returned. I sat at my desk, powered on my computer, and opened my email as usual. In the priority inbox, there was one unread message. Sender, Ryan Peterson. I clicked it. Subject, apology and goodbye. Rachel, I don't know where to start, but after last night, I couldn't sleep. I've been thinking what happened. Probably shouldn't have happened in front of so many people, but at the same time, I feel a strange sense of clarity, especially about you. I'm not ashamed that you're Emma's sister. I'm ashamed that I didn't see her true self sooner. I can't stay in a relationship where basic respect doesn't exist. As of today, I'm ending things with Emma. Thank you for staying silent yesterday, and thank you for the way you lead. Quiet but strong and fair. Ryan. I read it twice, then leaned back in my chair. I wasn't happy that Emma got dumped. I just felt something right. Like for the first time, someone outside finally saw what I'd been living with for years. The things I was told I was too sensitive about or too cold for staying quiet about. I didn't reply, there was no need. But about 2 hours later, as I was reviewing the financial summary from the finance team, my phone lit up. A message from Emma. Rachel, I know you're busy, but please can you talk to Ryan for me? He's misunderstanding everything. I looked at the message, calm and unmoved. I didn't reply right away. Less than 5 minutes later, another message came through. You're his boss. You have influence. If you say something, he'll reconsider. I stood up and walked over to the window, gazing down at the busy street below. All those years I had wished for just one message from Emma checking in when I was hurting. One word of encouragement when I failed. But there was nothing. And now that her relationship had crumbled, the person she turned to was me. Not to apologize, but to fix it. I returned to my desk and typed, Ryan didn't leave because of anything I said. He left because of who you are. And maybe for the first time, he really saw it. Emma didn't reply immediately, but about an hour later, a new message arrived. "You're right, but I really don't want to lose him. I'll change this time. Please, just this once." I didn't respond, not because I was angry, but because I was past the point of explaining. When I left the office that evening, the early spring breeze was still chilly, but the sunset cast a deep orange glow across the rooftops. I walked to the parking lot slowly, without hurry, without worry. Maybe for the first time in years, I felt light. I hadn't sought revenge. I had simply lived my truth and let the rest reveal itself. Emma had brought this ending on herself. And Ryan, once dazzled by the facade of a perfect family, had finally seen the foundation beneath, the one I had lived on most of my life. That night, I played an old playlist, the kind of music that used to make me feel invisible during my early startup days. But tonight, the melody sounded like a quiet affirmation. I had stepped out of the shadows, not by yelling, but by standing firm. And that's what Emma, or anyone else in my family, had never seen coming. I didn't need validation anymore. I just needed to be myself and live what I truly deserve. About a week after things calmed down, on a rare Sunday afternoon when I decided not to touch my laptop, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I almost ignored it. But something made me glance through the peephole. My parents were standing at the gate. I stood still for a few seconds, letting my mind catch up with what I was seeing. My mom held a small bag, her face tired. My dad had his arms crossed, his eyes less stern than during our last call, but still carrying that usual hardness. I opened the door, said nothing. "Hi, honey," my mom said first, her voice raspy like she'd just gotten off a long flight. "Can we come in and talk for a bit?" I silently stepped aside to let them in. No hugs, no warm greetings, just a heavy silence stretching from the hallway to the living room. I poured some water, set down 2 glasses, and sat across from them. My mom glanced around the apartment. Simple, tidy, and completely untouched by any presence of my parents. My dad spoke first. "About your mom's birthday, I said some things I shouldn't have." I stayed quiet. He looked at me, then continued, slower this time. "Maybe we've been a little hard on you? Emma's been a mess since the breakup, and your mom's been crying nonstop, so we wanted to sit down and talk like a family." I still said nothing, just nodded slightly. I wanted to see where they were going with this. I was used to the long build-up before they got to what they really came for. Just as I expected, my mom jumped in right after. "Well, we actually have a proposal." She hesitated, then placed the bag on the table and pulled out a printed sheet. "We've thought it through. You're stable now. Your job is great. If possible, we're hoping you could help us with a monthly contribution, around $2,000. Just enough to cover living costs, insurance, and some retirement savings." I looked up at her. $2,000 a month? My dad jumped in, as if afraid I'd misunderstand. It's not much for someone in your position. We're family, Rachel." I sat up straighter and kept my tone steady. "What about Emma?" My mom hesitated. "She's not doing well after the breakup. She's down. Work's not going great. We can't pressure her." I let out a soft laugh, not out of bitterness, just because it was all so familiar. Emma was always the one who couldn't be pressured, and I was always the one who could handle it. I looked directly at them. If Emma agrees to contribute her part, $1,000 a month, and we put everything in a contract, one that clearly states, when you both pass, all assets, including the house, will belong to me. Silence filled the room. My father furrowed his brow, his face flushing red. "Are you seriously giving your own parents conditions?" I didn't blink. "Not conditions, principles. I already spent nearly $16,000 on this family over 2 years without anyone ever acknowledging it. If you want me to continue, then things need to be clear." My mother turned to my father, her voice starting to waver. "Maybe we should talk it over." But he shot up from his seat, slamming his hand against the wooden table, making the glasses rattle. We raised her for over 20 years. And now when we ask for a little help, she demands a contract? Unbelievable. I stayed seated, my eyes locked on him. Dad, I don't owe you. If you think raising me was some kind of investment that needs a return, we can calculate it line by line, but I won't pay for it with silence anymore. He looked like he wanted to argue but froze, lips pressed tight. My mother stood up and gently tugged at his arm. Let's go. I stood too, walking them to the door. No hugs, no goodbyes. When the door closed behind them, all that remained was the soft breeze drifting in from the balcony. In that stillness, I knew another chapter had ended. And this time, I was the one who wrote the final line. After that day, my parents never reached out again. No calls, no messages, no accusations, not even an apology for the outburst that had hit my home like a storm. As if every disappointment in their lives had been caused by their difficult daughter. But I wasn't surprised. I'd grown used to that kind of silence, the kind that didn't come from shame or remorse, but simply from people who don't know how to speak when they're no longer in control. I kept living my life. Quiet mornings with coffee, strategic meetings that ran late into the evening, signing deals with partners who once doubted a young woman could run a biotech company. And through it all, I stopped feeling guilty. I stopped thinking I was wrong for saying no to being the backup wallet, the default caretaker, just because I could handle it. Because eventually you have to understand, love can't be measured in monthly payments, and it can't be forced through a sense of duty. If affection only exists as long as the bills are paid, then it's not family, it's a transaction. I started cutting the invisible strings that tied me to the roles they had assigned me. I no longer used a family photo as my phone wallpaper. I didn't remember Emma's birthday. I didn't mark the holidays to send a little something. I no longer hovered over guilt-ridden messages. I learned to put the period myself instead of waiting for them to start with an apology. One day during a team meeting, Ryan, now officially our company's head of finance, walked in with an investment report. He worked with focus, professionalism, and always kept a respectful distance. We never talked about Emma, not once, and I appreciated that. Some things, when fully understood, are best left unspoken. That afternoon as I left the office, it was drizzling. I stopped by a familiar cafe, choosing a seat by the window. On the wall was a carved wooden sign. Home is not always a place. Sometimes it's a choice. I sat there, sipping a hot latte, reflecting on the path I'd taken. There was a time when I believed that if I just stayed quiet, gentle, and responsible enough, I would eventually be accepted. But the truth is, if you let people get used to disrespecting you, they'll start seeing your sacrifices as obligations and your silence as agreement. I chose to stand up, not to go against my family, but to protect myself. I chose to set boundaries, not because I'm selfish, but because I finally understood self-worth can't be defined by someone else's pity or sudden needs. And if someone were to ask me, Rachel, do you regret not helping your parents when they needed you? My answer would be, I regret that it took me so long to realize I deserved more than that. Because real family is where you're seen as a whole person. Not a wallet, not a stand-in, not the fallback plan for people who always put you last. I know my story might be hard for some people to accept. In our society, refusing family duty is often seen as ungrateful. But try stepping into my shoes. The daughter who was shut out for not being polished enough to introduce. The one who paid tens of thousands in silence and never once heard, "Are you okay?" I didn't choose family in the traditional sense. I chose myself. What about you? Do you think I was too cold? Or did I finally learn how to love myself at the right time? Share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes your story might be the light someone else needs when they're struggling between duty and freedom. And if you've ever felt alone in your own family, believe me, you're not. Rachel's story is a powerful reminder that no one is obligated to sacrifice themselves for a relationship that only carries the label family but lacks respect. When you learn to set boundaries, choose self-love, and stop letting your kindness be taken for granted, that's not selfishness, that's growth. Rachel didn't seek revenge. She chose dignified silence to reaffirm her worth. And sometimes, the firmest action is the very first step to real peace. What do you think of Rachel's choice? Was she too harsh? Or was she simply protecting herself after years of being hurt? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more deep and meaningful stories about family relationships.
The blueprints dissolved in my hands as I stood in my father's home office. "Just a hobby," he murmured, sliding my meticulously crafted healthcare interface designs aside without a glance to reach for his fountain pen. "We need to discuss your law school applications, Vivian. They're due next week." My pulse hammered in my throat as I watched 6 months of work, the platform prototype that had already caught the interest of 2 hospital administrators, dismissed without even a cursory look. Behind him, framed on the wall, hung my brother's medical school acceptance letter, illuminated by a small spotlight we'd installed specially for it. "Did you even look at it?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. My father glanced up, mild confusion crossing his face as if I'd spoken in a language he didn't quite understand. "This programming thing is cute, but it's not a career, not for a Whitfield." My name is Vivian, I'm 33, and this is the story of how I built an empire in silence before revealing it to the family that never saw me. For the Whitfields, success had a precise definition. My father, Dr. Edward Whitfield, was Boston's premier cardiothoracic surgeon. My mother, Naomi, was the kind of attorney who made opposing counsel prepare for weeks before facing her in court. And my brother, Parker, was the golden child. Harvard Medical School, top of his class, following perfectly in our father's footsteps. Then there was me, the aberration, the one whose ambitions didn't fit the family blueprint, the one they guided with concerned expressions and barely concealed disappointment. I still remember the weight of that moment in my father's office, the exact second I realized I would never be able to make them see me. Not until I had something so undeniable they couldn't possibly look away, something that would force recognition on my own terms. That night, I made 2 decisions. First, I would build what I knew needed to exist, a healthcare communication platform that would prevent the kind of errors that had nearly killed my grandmother 3 times. Second, I would do it completely outside my family's awareness. Not because I wanted revenge exactly, but because I wanted to arrive fully formed, not as a work in progress they could dismiss or reshape. At Northeastern Tech, far enough from Boston that the Whitfield name carried no weight, I found oxygen. I met Olivia Marcus in an advanced coding seminar, brilliant, fearless, and just as determined to build something meaningful. We recognized each other instantly as kindred spirits. "Your family doesn't get it either?" she asked one night as we coded until 2 a.m. in the campus tech lab. "They don't try to," I replied, not looking up from my screen. "Yours?" "My uncle died because 2 departments in the same hospital couldn't communicate about his medications," she said quietly. When I told my parents I wanted to fix that, instead of going to law school, my dad asked if I was having a phase. We laughed, but there was an edge to it, the kind that comes from recognition of a shared wound. MediSync started in Olivia's garage our senior year. While classmates lined up corporate interviews, we built our prototype, surviving on ramen and determination. Her parents brought us dinner sometimes, asked questions, expressed genuine interest. Mine still thought I was finding myself in a tech support role. The few times I tried to explain what we were building, my mother would nod with the practiced patience of someone humoring a child's fantasy. "That's nice, dear, but have you considered applying to paralegal positions? Get your foot in the door while you figure things out." By graduation, we'd won a regional entrepreneurship competition. The $50,000 prize funded our incorporation and connected us with Dr. Jessica Lowe, an administrator at Chicago Memorial who became our first client. "This interface could prevent hundreds of errors," she said, reviewing our demo. "How big is your team?" "Just us," Olivia replied. Dr. Lowe looked surprised. "Well, that's about to change." She was right. We moved to Chicago, took a cramped apartment, and worked 18-hour days. I remember our first real crisis. We couldn't make rent, so we bartered with our landlord, building his company website in exchange for a grace period. Those early years blurred together in a haze of pitch meetings, coding marathons, and incremental victories. When we hired Devin, a brilliant developer who'd left MIT's graduate program to join us, it felt like a turning point. 6 months later, we landed our second hospital contract, then a third. all while my family remained oblivious. At Thanksgiving dinner that year, my brother dominated the conversation with stories from his residency. My parents leaned forward, captivated by every detail. "And you, Vivian?" my mother finally asked, her tone dropping slightly. "Still with that computer help desk?" I took a sip of wine, the irony burning more than the alcohol. That morning, I'd closed a $1.2 million funding round. "Something like that," I replied. It wasn't spite that kept me silent. It was self-preservation. I couldn't bear to have something so precious, something we'd built from nothing, subjected to their particular brand of dismissal. Better they thought me adrift than to have MediSync diminished as a cute little startup. By the time I turned 31, MediSync was valued at $85 million. Our software ran in 127 hospitals nationwide. We had 46 employees, an actual HR department, and had already declined 2 acquisition offers. The years of rapid growth had been fueled by 3 strategic funding rounds and a breakthrough partnership with a national hospital chain that tripled our user base in 18 months. I still hadn't told my family. They never asked specifics, so I never volunteered them. Parker was now chief resident at Massachusetts General. My parents' Christmas cards referred to me as working in technology, deliberately vague, as if my career was too embarrassing to name. I had carefully constructed my online presence to maintain privacy, using my first name and middle initial professionally, and keeping company photos to a minimum, which protected my anonymity even as MediSync gained industry recognition. Then Rachel Calloway's email arrived in my inbox. "I'm reaching out regarding potential strategic alignment between MediSync and Horizon Health Technologies." It read, "Our preliminary analysis suggests exceptional synergy between our platforms." I stared at the name for a full minute before connecting the dots. Rachel Calloway, the same Rachel my brother had been dating for nearly a year, the same Rachel who was now apparently Horizon's Director of Strategic Acquisitions, the same Rachel who, according to my mother's latest update, would soon become my sister-in-law. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I researched her thoroughly, confirming what I already suspected. Rachel had no idea that the founder of MediSync, the company Horizon had been tracking for months, was her boyfriend's sister. I maintained a deliberately low profile. No photos in press releases, first name only in articles. Within tech circles, I'd become something of an enigma, the ghost founder who built MediSync but avoided the spotlight. But now, with Rachel pursuing acquisition talks and my brother's engagement imminent, discovery was inevitable. The question wasn't if, but when, and more importantly, how. Would I let it happen by accident, or would I control the revelation? For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine their reactions. The realization that the daughter they'd dismissed as directionless had built something revolutionary. The understanding that while they'd been categorizing me as lost, I'd been finding exactly what I was meant to create. 2 weeks later, my mother called about Parker's engagement dinner. "Make sure you dress appropriately," she instructed. "Rachel's family is very accomplished. We want to present well." Translation: "Don't embarrass us with your usual practical outfits." "I'll find something suitable," I promised. I chose a black dress, tailored, elegant, powerful. Not to prove anything, just to feel grounded in who I'd become. The restaurant was Blue Ridge, Chicago's newest Michelin-starred establishment. Glass and marble overlooking the river, white tablecloths so pristine they seemed to glow under the chandeliers. I arrived precisely on time, not early enough to help with seating arrangements, not late enough to make an entrance. Parker greeted me with his usual easy charm. "Viv, glad you made it." He introduced me to Rachel, who smiled warmly but without recognition. Why would she connect me to MediSync? In her mind, her fiancé's sister worked in basic IT support. Dinner proceeded with predictable choreography. My father dominated with stories of Parker's latest publication in the Journal of Neurology. My mother dabbed at tears while recalling his first science fair victory. No one mentioned me. I was seated beside cousin Jennifer, who asked if I was still between jobs. "I work in healthcare technology," I replied. "Oh, like an app or something?" she asked, eyebrows raised in performative interest. "Something like that." Between courses, Uncle Thomas leaned across the table. Parker mentioned you might have a shot at something at Apple. Entry level, but solid. I nodded politely. That won't be necessary. From across the table, I noticed Rachel studying me, her brow furrowed slightly, head tilted in concentration. I recognized that look. Someone flipping through mental files, trying to place a face. Vivian Whitfield, she said slowly, the realization dawning in her eyes. Wait, your last name is Whitfield. Parker laughed. Of course it is. She's my sister. Rachel set down her fork deliberately. You're Vivian Whitfield of MediSync. The table fell silent. Even the waitstaff seemed to pause. I am, I confirmed evenly. You're the founder of MediSync. My mother's hand froze on her wine glass. My father's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. Rachel turned to Parker, visibly stunned. You didn't tell me your sister founded MediSync, the company we're in final acquisition talks with. Parker blinked rapidly. What? Vivian, number. There must be some mistake. My sister works in tech support. No, Rachel said firmly, eyes locked on me. Your sister is the co-founder and CEO of the most revolutionary healthcare communications platform on the market. We've been negotiating with her company for months at a valuation of over $200 million. The silence was suffocating. Then, one by one, every head at the table swiveled toward me. My mother's hand clutched her pearls. My father looked suddenly older. Parker just stared. Is that true? He whispered. Yes, I replied. We started MediSync in a garage. Now we serve over 300 hospitals nationwide. No one spoke, not even Rachel, who wore an expression halfway between apology and awe. The rest of dinner was surreal. Relatives who had barely acknowledged me for years now leaned in eagerly to ask about investment opportunities. My mother mentioned 3 times how she'd always known I had a special gift with computers. My father claimed he'd been telling colleagues about my startup for years. I didn't correct them. I didn't need to. Parker remained mostly silent, still processing that his supposedly floundering sister had built an empire while no one was watching. After dessert, Rachel pulled me aside near the windows. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I shook my head. You didn't. That moment was inevitable. For what it's worth, she added, your platform is extraordinary. Our analysts can't stop talking about it. I recognized you from a blurry photo in an industry presentation our team compiled. When I heard your name tonight and put together who you were, I couldn't believe the coincidence. I studied her face. This woman who knew more about my professional achievements than my own family ever bothered to learn. Thank you, I said, and meant it. That night, I walked to my car without looking back. For years, I had fantasized about them finally seeing me. Now they had, and I realized it changed nothing fundamental. I had already become everything I needed to be long before they ever noticed. The morning after dinner, my phone exploded with notifications. My mother. We need to talk. Brunch tomorrow. Drake Hotel, 11 a.m. My father. Proud of you. Let's catch up. Parker's came hours later. Simpler. Why didn't you tell me? I stared at his message longest. I hadn't told them because I didn't want to need their validation and because I wasn't sure what would hurt more, being dismissed or being claimed only after I'd already succeeded. But I agreed to brunch. Some things needed to be said aloud. They were already seated when I arrived at the Drake, both dressed for a client meeting rather than family brunch. My mother wore pearls and silk. My father, his most formal weekend blazer, as if my success now required them to treat me like a peer instead of a daughter. Vivian, my father said, rising halfway for an awkward, unfamiliar hug. You look well. My mother didn't wait. Darling, I've been reading everything. The innovation awards, the funding rounds, the user growth. It's remarkable. She paused. But why didn't you share any of this with us? I smoothed the napkin across my lap, because the last time I tried, you told me to apply for jobs answering phones. That's not fair, my father said quickly, his tone defensive. We were trying to help. No, I replied, meeting his gaze. You were trying to fix something that wasn't broken. My mother's face stiffened. We just didn't understand, Vivian. The tech world moves so fast, it felt unstable. And medicine doesn't? I countered gently. Law doesn't. That's different. Those are structured, she insisted. I know, I nodded. That's what scared you. I chose something you couldn't control. My father sighed. But you're clearly brilliant. We always knew that. You knew what you wanted me to be, I corrected. That's not the same. The waiter brought coffee, offering a momentary reprieve. I stirred in cream, trying to contain the heat rising in my chest. I spent years building something I loved, I continued once he left, and every time I tried to tell you, it felt like screaming into a storm. So eventually, I stopped trying. We thought you were lost, my mother whispered. I wasn't. I just wasn't yours to direct anymore. The silence between us felt fragile, like glass stretched too thin, but it held. We love you, she said softly. I know, I replied, but love without respect doesn't feel like love. For a moment, my father looked genuinely uncertain, like a man who'd spent his life being right, suddenly afraid he might have been wrong. The rest of brunch passed with fewer assumptions and more questions. They asked about Olivia, about our first office, about early hospital contracts. My mother even admitted she'd tried reading blogs on startup culture but couldn't understand the acronyms. It was the most vulnerable I'd seen her in years. We never meant to make you feel small, my father said near the end. You didn't mean to, I said, but you did. That's the part I've had to work through. He nodded slowly. I'm glad you worked through it, even if it wasn't with us. When we left the restaurant, there were no dramatic reconciliations, just a plan to have dinner again the following week. It was a start. A few nights later, Parker showed up at my apartment with wine and a bakery box. I tried baking, he said sheepishly. It went badly, so I bought backups. I smiled despite myself. Classic you. We sat on the floor, backs against the couch like we had as kids, watching the Chicago skyline glitter outside my window. I need to say this, he began without preamble. I'm sorry. I looked over, surprised by the directness. I believed what Mom and Dad believed, that you were floundering, that you'd missed your shot. He shook his head. But you weren't lost. You were building something they didn't understand. I never asked, and that's on me. You weren't the only one, I said. But I'm the only one here right now. He raised his glass to the black sheep. I clinked mine against his, to the sheep that built an empire. We laughed, the sound echoing softly in the quiet apartment. That moment mattered more than any acquisition, any valuation, any closed deal, because he wasn't just proud. He finally saw me. 6 months later, the world had changed, but not in the way I once fantasized. Yes, the Horizon deal closed. MediSync became part of one of the largest healthcare tech portfolios in the world. Olivia took over global strategy. I accepted the role of head of innovation, working with Horizon's leadership to scale our platform across continents. My office now overlooked the Chicago River, glass walls framing a skyline that once seemed unreachable. But that wasn't the real transformation. The real change was quieter. It was my mother texting me a screenshot of an article about women in tech with the message, "Have you met her? She reminds me of you." It was my father sitting through a complete product demo, nodding not because he understood every detail, but because he finally knew it mattered. It was Parker mentioning casually that he'd quoted one of my white papers during grand rounds. And it was me, no longer shrinking, hosting monthly mentorship dinners for young women in STEM, reminding them that even when no one claps, their work still counts. One afternoon, a high school student I mentored asked, "Do you ever wish they had believed in you sooner?" I considered that. Sometimes, I admitted, it would have made things easier, but it might have made me softer too. She nodded, not entirely sure what I meant. There's power in building alone, I added. It forces you to believe in yourself before anyone else does. And once you have that, no one can take it away from you. I still think about that often, because it's the truth I didn't know I was chasing all along. Recognition is sweet, but it fades. Conviction stays. That night, standing by the window of my office watching the city lights flicker below, I smiled. Not because they finally saw me, but because I never needed them to. Not really. Because real success isn't proving others wrong. It's proving yourself right and living like you believe it. The sizzle of steaks hitting the grill wasn't what made my skin prickle. It was my father's voice, cutting through the backyard chatter with deliberate precision. "Hey, Bianca," he called out, eyes glinting with the satisfaction of a predator who knows his prey is cornered. "You're old enough to pay rent or get out. This isn't a charity." Every conversation around us stuttered to a halt. My throat constricted as I felt dozens of eyes shift in my direction. Neighbors, family, friends, cousins, all suddenly witness to my humiliation. The potato salad bowl I was carrying grew impossibly heavy in my hands. What made it unbearable wasn't just the demand. It was the laughter that followed. My stepmother Erin's high-pitched giggle, my half-brother Flynn's smug chuckle as he popped open another beer. And worst of all, my father's satisfied smirk as he flipped a steak, spatula waving dismissively in my direction. My name is Bianca. I'm 24 and a paralegal saving for law school. This is the story of how I reclaim my life by letting theirs fall apart. "You've been taking half my paycheck for years, Dad," I said, my voice steadier than the trembling in my fingertips would suggest. "I've been paying the bills." His face twisted into that exaggerated mock surprise I'd seen 1,000 times. "So? That's called life." He gestured broadly to the neighbors who were pretending not to listen. "If you don't like it, find somewhere else to live." Flynn snorted. "Good luck with that." The air felt electric, charged with something more dangerous than embarrassment. The neighbors' eyes darted between us like spectators at a tennis match, waiting for me to break, to cry, to retreat like I always had before. The scent of charred meat mingled with something sour, the taste of a decision crystallizing in my mouth. I stepped closer to my father, close enough to see the pores on his nose, the tiny burst blood vessels from years of drinking. "Fine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper but somehow filling the sudden silence. "You want me gone? You'll get your wish." He laughed, the sound harsh and dismissive. "Yeah? And where are you going to go? Back to that falling-apart apartment complex? You've got no savings, Bianca." What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been preparing for this moment for months. The keys to my new house sat heavy in my pocket, pressed against my thigh like a secret weapon. The rest of the barbecue blurred into a haze of forced smiles and whispered commentary. I moved through it like a ghost, my mind already miles away, laying out the steps of what would come next. If he wanted me gone, I wouldn't just leave. I'd take everything they'd been leeching from me for years. By the time the last guests left, trailing awkward goodbyes in their wake, my decision was made. I wouldn't drag this out with arguments or tears. I'd be gone by morning, and with me would go the financial foundation they'd built their lives upon. Dawn hadn't yet broken when I loaded the final box into my car. My hands weren't shaking from grief, but from a strange electric anticipation. The house I'd grown up in sat silent behind me, unaware it was about to become the site of a long overdue reckoning. I drove through empty streets to my new home, a modest 2-story with white siding and a porch that wrapped around like a protective embrace. The air smelled different here, cleaner. By noon, I had the deed spread out on my kitchen counter, my name in black ink declaring this space mine and mine alone. I had been secretly saving for years while working as a paralegal, keeping a separate account they knew nothing about. I had been cutting expenses wherever I could to make this possible. I sent my father a text message, simple and direct. "I've moved out. The bills are yours now." The response was immediate, my phone lighting up with his name, then Erin's, then Flynn's in rapid succession. I let each call ring through to voicemail, a small satisfaction building with each unanswered ring. The sound of tires on gravel came before sunset. My father's truck, followed by Erin's sedan, pulled into my driveway uninvited. I watched through the window as they emerged. My father's face pale with something I'd never seen before. Not anger, fear. I stepped onto my porch, arms crossed as they approached. My father stopped at the bottom step, shoulders rigid. "You're not serious," he said, voice lower than usual. I leaned against the railing, feeling the solid wood against my back. I told you. You said pay rent or get out. I chose get out. I paused, letting the next words land with precision. And now I'll stop paying your bills too. The color drained from his face completely. Aaron's mouth opened and closed without sound. Flynn hung back by the car, suddenly looking like the child he'd never outgrown being. In that moment, I understood the power I'd been giving away for years and the strange, intoxicating feeling of taking it back. After they drove away, I stood on my porch in the gathering dusk, breathing in air that finally felt like my own. Not relief, not yet. This was the first breath in years that didn't feel borrowed or owed. Inside, I opened my laptop and methodically severed every financial connection they'd used to drain me. Electric bill, removed from my account, gas, water, internet, car insurance. Each one cut like a cord that had been tethering me to their sinking ship. With each confirmation email, I felt my spine straighten incrementally. My phone lit up with their names in desperate rotation. I let each call go unanswered, watching as they transitioned from demands to pleas. By evening, the family group chat exploded. Dad, this isn't funny. Aaron, Bianca, the Wi-Fi is down. Dad, you can't just shut things off. Aaron, that's not how family works. Flynn, hope you're happy. You ruined dinner. I typed one response, I've moved out. Bills are your responsibility now. Please don't show up uninvited. Their truck pulled up outside my house before the sun had set. This time, my father didn't wait at the steps. He marched up to my door, Erin trailing behind him with her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold, though the evening was warm. All right, enough of this stunt, he said when I opened the door. You made your point. Turn the accounts back on for a week while we transition. I met his gaze directly, something I'd trained myself not to do for years. You've been taking half my paycheck since I was 17. You made it clear last night. You want me gone? I'm gone, and so is my money. Aaron let out a bitter laugh. Wow, cold. No, I said, stepping down to meet them on equal ground. Cold is laughing at your child in front of neighbors. This question mark, this is warm compared to that. My father's mouth opened, but for once, no words came out. I saw something flicker across his face. Uncertainty, maybe even the first glimmer of understanding what he'd lost. I walked back up the porch steps. You'll figure it out, just like I did. The door closed behind me with a definitive click, and for the first time in years, I was the one holding the key. Morning arrived with a silence I'd forgotten could exist. No stomping boots, no blaring television, no errands shouting about misplaced items. Just stillness and the gentle hiss of coffee brewing in my kitchen, steam curling into sunlight that streamed through windows that were mine alone. My momentary peace shattered when my phone lit up with a barrage of messages. Unknown number. Call us. This is urgent. Dad, the electric's off. There's food spoiling. Aaron, we have to talk. If you care about this family, you'll fix this today. I set the phone down, refusing to let their chaos infiltrate the calm I'd created. They were learning what I'd known for years, that bills don't magically pay themselves. The knocking started at noon, 3 sharp raps that made my heart jump despite my resolve. Through the camera I'd installed, I saw Erin alone, designer sunglasses covering half her face. I opened the door just enough to form a barrier between us. What do you want? Her smile was brittle. Practiced. We need the car insurance in your name for just a few more days. Flynn's got an interview. I already moved it to my address, I said, feeling nothing at the flash of panic across her features. It's my policy. If Flynn's driving, he needs his own. Her jaw tightened. You're punishing us. No, I said, leaning against the doorframe. I'm refusing to be punished anymore. She blinked rapidly, caught off guard by my calmness. Your father's furious. You know he's only like this because he's stressed. The shop closing... That shop closed 3 years ago, I interrupted. He's had 3 years to stop using me as his personal ATM. Her mask slipped for an instant, revealing the hardness beneath. You'll regret this. Sooner than you think. I closed the door without responding, the quiet click more satisfying than any shouted retort. That night, as I unpacked boxes in my new living room, my phone lit up with an email notification: suspicious login attempt detected. My stomach tightened as I logged into my bank account to find multiple failed password attempts and something else. A department store credit card I'd never opened, registered in my name with their address. The pieces connected instantly. My purse had gone missing in their house a year ago, only to reappear days later with supposedly nothing taken. I printed every email, every statement, and slid them into a folder labeled Boundaries in bold black marker. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore, I was building a case. At midnight, a text from Flynn. "You think you're better than us now? Watch your mailbox." I stared at the screen, feeling the anger in my chest condense into something colder, harder, more focused. They weren't just losing my money, they were losing control. And the more they realized it, the uglier this would become. 2 days passed in unnatural quiet. No knocking, no calls, just occasional texts from Flynn, dripping with veiled threats. I kept my responses minimal, always in writing, preserving every word as my attorney had advised. I'd consulted with a lawyer at the firm where I worked as soon as I discovered the credit card fraud, showing him the evidence I'd gathered. On the third morning, as I sipped coffee at my kitchen counter, my phone erupted with notifications. Screenshots from friends and neighbors showed Facebook posts from Erin, written in her practiced victim tone. "Some people think they can just turn their back on family. After all we've done, they leave us in the dark, literally." The comments offered predictable sympathy. Mutual friends, distant relatives I barely knew asking what happened. But most telling, not one mentioned me by name. They wanted to control the narrative without giving me a voice in it. I didn't engage. Instead, I called each utility company again, confirming every account had been transferred to their name. I wasn't leaving a single thread they could pull. My doorbell rang at noon. The camera showed my father alone, hands thrust deep in his jacket pockets despite the warm day. I opened the door but remained firmly in the threshold. "What is it?" His voice was unnaturally controlled, but tension vibrated beneath it. "We've got a situation. The mortgage payment's due, and without your transfer—" "Not my problem," I said before he could finish. His eyes narrowed. "Do you even hear yourself? You've been part of this household for years. You don't just walk away from responsibilities overnight." A laugh escaped me, sharp, genuine, and entirely without humor. "You mean the responsibilities you dumped on me the second I started earning a paycheck? The ones you never asked about, just took?" He stepped closer, invading my space in that way he'd always used to intimidate me. "You think this new place makes you better than us? That you can hide here while we drown?" I met his stare without blinking. "I'm not hiding, Dad. I'm just done being your lifeline." His jaw worked like he was chewing on unsaid threats. Then he turned to leave, tossing one final barb over his shoulder. "You're going to regret this when you come crawling back." I closed the door slowly, almost savoring the sound of the lock engaging. Crawling back wasn't in my vocabulary anymore. That evening, as dusk settled over my new neighborhood, their unraveling played out in real time. A former neighbor called, voice hushed with gossip. "They're out in the driveway arguing, something about the bank account being overdrawn. Erin's screaming she can't buy groceries, and your dad keeps saying, 'It's your fault.'" I thanked them and hung up, sitting in the stillness that followed. They were feeling it now. The weight I'd carried alone for years, suddenly pressing down on them. The next day, I made it clear this wasn't just about leaving. It was about reclaiming every piece of myself they'd stolen. At the bank, I met with a manager and closed the last joint account they still had access to. The folder of evidence in my bag grew thicker, more complete. That evening, a text from Erin. "You've made your point. We get it. Just please help us this month. We'll figure it out after." I didn't reply. 2 hours later, she posted publicly. "Funny how people change when they think they don't need you anymore, but life has a way of humbling everyone." For once, she was right. Life does have a way of humbling everyone, and theirs was just beginning. Saturday morning brought the perfect opportunity. As I scrolled through emails, one from the mortgage company caught my eye. Urgent, past due balance and notice of public auction. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I'd removed my name from everything connected to that house weeks ago. But opening it, I realized the bank still had me listed as an emergency contact from years before. My father had added me to the mortgage contact list while I was handling the paperwork during his recovery from surgery. The letter was unambiguous. 2 payments missed, no arrangement made, auction date set in 30 days. I stared at the screen, watching the cursor blink. Once I would have rushed to save them, draining my savings again to rescue them from consequences. Now I hit print and added the paper to my boundaries folder. The pounding at my door came at noon. All 3 stood on my porch. My father red-faced, Aaron tight-lipped, Flynn smirking like he was about to win a game only he understood. I stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind me. My father didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You saw the notice. We can't lose the house, Bianca. You're going to help fix this." I folded my arms. "No, I'm not." "You're still family," he shouted, loud enough for neighbors across the street to turn and stare. I didn't lower my voice. Family doesn't use you as a wallet. Family doesn't laugh while you're humiliated in front of half the neighborhood. Family doesn't commit fraud in your name and expect you to just take it. Aaron stepped forward, eyes darting nervously to the people watching. "Do you have to make a scene?" "Yes," I said flatly, "because you had no problem making one when it suited you." Flynn muttered under his breath, "Unbelievable." I turned to him. "You're right. It is unbelievable that I let this go on for as long as I did." My father's voice dropped to that quiet, dangerous tone that once made me shrink. "If you walk away from this, you'll be nothing to us." I smiled, feeling nothing but a strange lightness. "Then I'll be nothing to you and everything to myself." I stepped back toward my door, but before going inside, I pulled the printed foreclosure notice from my folder and held it up for them to see. "This," I said, my voice cutting through the tension between us, "is what happens when the person you've been draining finally stops bleeding for you." I let the paper fall to the porch at their feet. The door closed behind me with a solid, satisfying click. Through the blinds, I watched them stand frozen. My father staring at the fallen notice, Aaron glancing anxiously at the neighbors, Flynn kicking at the paper as if it might bite him. They left without another word. That evening, I posted a single line on my social media. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the chance to stand on their own 2 feet. The supportive comments accumulated throughout the night. People congratulating me on my new place, sending messages of encouragement, asking if I'd finally moved out. Not once did I mention them by name. I didn't need to, because the truth was simple. Their downfall wasn't my story to tell anymore. It was theirs to live, and I was finally free to live mine. 3 months later, I received the final notice that the credit fraud case against them had been settled. The department store card had been removed from my credit report, and my father and Aaron had been ordered to pay restitution. They never contacted me again after that day on my porch, and I heard through mutual friends that they had to sell most of their possessions and move to a small apartment across town. Flynn eventually got his own place, apparently having learned the hard way that standing on his own feet was the only option left. As for me, I'm thriving in my new home, debt-free, and starting law school next fall. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do to others, it's what you do for yourself. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, 0 cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one. The champagne flute nearly slipped from my grip as my sister's words cut through the celebratory din of the country club banquet. It's just embarrassing, honestly. Sarah and her little restaurant job. Dad's paying for her rent again this month. Diana's voice carried just enough to reach me as I approached their table, gift bag in hand. My father, whose birthday we were celebrating, nodded in solemn agreement while my mother patted his arm sympathetically. They hadn't seen me yet. 3 feet away, I stood frozen in my simple black dress. the one Diana had mocked last Christmas as clearance rack chic. The bartender caught my eye with a look of concern. He recognized me immediately, though not as the struggling eldest Walker daughter my family was describing. No, he knew me as the owner who had approved his salary increase last month. My name is Nicole. I'm 32 and a restaurant owner. This is the story of how I transformed from family disappointment to the empire they never saw coming. 6 months ago, I'd purchased Harrington Country Club, the very establishment where my family had flaunted their membership for decades. I hadn't told them, just like I hadn't mentioned buying Lumiere, the French restaurant where they celebrated every special occasion, or Castillo, where my sister hosted her engagement party, or the 29 other high-end establishments across 3 continents that comprised Walker Restaurant Group, named with a private satisfaction they'd never appreciated. I'd lived modestly by choice, reinvesting profits rather than flaunting wealth. My apartment was small but functional, my wardrobe practical rather than designer-filled. These choices weren't from necessity but priority, something my status-obsessed family never understood. Poor Sarah, my mother sighed, adjusting her diamond bracelet. If only she'd taken that position at your firm, Richard. My father swirled his scotch. Too stubborn for her own good. Restaurant management instead of finance? What a waste of potential. The words echoed previous conversations, ones where they'd refused to support my MBA in hospitality management, where they'd laughed at my business plan, where they'd introduced me at family gatherings as Sarah still figuring things out, while Diana was following in her father's footsteps. I straightened my shoulders and approached their table. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said, placing the small gift beside his plate. Diana looked up, her smile tightening when she saw me. "Oh, Sarah. We didn't see you there." Her eyes flicked dismissively over my dress. "Glad you could make it. We were just discussing the new chef here. Isn't the food divine?" "The scallops are particularly good," I agreed, taking the empty seat. "Chef Liam has an innovative approach to seafood." My father frowned. "You've eaten here before? I thought this place was outside your budget constraints." "I manage," I said simply. "Well," my mother interjected, clearly trying to change the subject, "Diana was just telling us about their trip to Paris. They dined at Lumiere. Richard, remember when we had to wait 6 months for a reservation there?" Diana preened. The maitre d' recognized the Walker name immediately. We were seated at the best table. "Of course they did," I murmured, accepting the wine list from the approaching server. "Ms. Walker," he said respectfully, "Chef Liam mentioned you might stop by tonight. He's prepared something special for the table." My father's hand paused midway to his glass. My mother's smile froze. Diana's eyes darted between me and the server. "Thank you, Brett," I replied. "That would be lovely." As Brett departed, silence descended on the table. My father cleared his throat. "You know the chef here?" I took a sip of water, savoring the moment. "I know all my chefs, Dad." "Your chefs?" Diana's voice rose slightly. "Yes," I set down my glass. "All 32 of them." 32 what? My mother's fork clattered against her plate. "Restaurants," I said calmly, "including this country club, Lumiere in Paris, and Castillo, where you hosted your engagement party last spring, Diana." The silence that followed had weight, density, texture. My father's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something approaching fear. Diana's mouth opened and closed without sound. "That's not possible," my father finally managed. "You live in that tiny apartment. You shop at normal stores. You dash." "Because I choose to," I interrupted. "Unlike some people, I don't measure success by what I wear or where I live." Brett returned with a bottle of wine, a rare vintage worth more than Diana's designer purse. "Your usual selection, Ms. Walker?" "Perfect. Thank you." As Brett poured, I watched realization dawn across their faces. 6 years ago, I continued, when you refused to support my MBA program, told me I was wasting my potential on serving food, I took out loans. When you bragged about Diana's junior position at your firm while dismissing my little restaurant job, I was restructuring Lumiere from near bankruptcy to the most exclusive reservation in the city. I leveraged that first success to secure investor funding for my second and third acquisitions, and within 3 years had established enough credibility with banks to expand internationally. My phone buzzed, likely my London team with updates on our newest location. I ignored it. "But your apartment," my mother whispered. "Your clothes." "Our choices," I finished. "I prefer investing in my staff's healthcare and education benefits rather than showing off wealth I don't need to prove." Chef Liam approached personally with the first course, a dish not yet on the regular menu. "Ms. Walker, I'd value your opinion on this new scallop preparation before we add it to the permanent menu." "Thank you, Liam. It looks exquisite." As he departed, my father leaned forward, his investment banker brain visibly calculating the value of my empire. "Sarah, why didn't you tell us?" "Why would I?" I sampled the scallop, perfectly seared. "You made it abundantly clear that my career choice wasn't worth acknowledging." Diana's phone buzzed, probably one of her country club friends who'd spotted us and was spreading the word about who really owned their favorite establishment. "Is that why you never joined our family vacations?" my mother asked. "You said you couldn't afford to come to London last summer." "I was in London," I replied, overseeing construction of my new restaurant. I just stayed in my penthouse instead of the family hotel. Brett approached again. "Ms. Walker, that investment group is calling again. They're offering to buy the restaurant chain." "Tell them what I always tell them, Brett. Not for sale at any price." My father nearly dropped his glass. "Investment group?" "Morgan Stanley," I said casually. "They've been trying to acquire us for months, offered 12 times earnings last week." The look on his face, the investment banker who had dismissed my business plan years ago, was priceless. "About reservations," Diana began, calculation replacing shock. "I'd love to bring some friends to Lumiere next month." "Your name doesn't guarantee special treatment anymore," I cut her off. "In fact, you might find some of our establishments mysteriously booked when you call." "But the staff tells me everything, Diana. Our customer management system flags your name and alerts managers whenever you make reservations. Every attempted name drop, every time you were rude to my employees, every complaint about prices that you charge to Dad's account." I smiled. "I know everything that happens in my restaurants." My mother tried a different approach. "Darling, you must let us host a celebration. To think our daughter is such a successful restaurant owner." "Funny," I observed. "That wasn't worth celebrating when you thought I was just managing one place." Brett appeared with a folder. "The wine list for London, Ms. Walker, and Mr. Thompson called about the Tokyo location." My father's head snapped up. "Tokyo? Opening next spring," I confirmed, though I'm sure Diana can tell you all about it. She was just there last month trying to use the Walker name to get a reservation at my Paris restaurant. Our reservation system is integrated across all locations, so I receive notifications when family members book tables. Diana had the grace to blush. I didn't know. Clearly. I stood, smoothing my dress, actually a handmade piece from a small Parisian atelier. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to speak with my chef." "But it's Dad's birthday dinner," my mother protested weakly. "And I've paid for it," I replied, "as I've paid for every meal you've had in my establishments for the past year without your knowledge. Our system automatically identifies Walker family credit cards, but processes them normally." I gestured to Brett. "Please make sure my family has everything they need. Add the usual gratuity to their bill." "Their bill?" Diana squeaked. "Of course," I smiled. "Just because I own the place doesn't mean everything's free. That wouldn't be good business, would it, Dad? In the kitchen, Chef Liam greeted me with enthusiasm, showing me the planned menu for London. Through the kitchen's viewing window, I could see my family huddled in uncomfortable conversation. My phone buzzed with texts from Diana. "I'm sorry for everything, for how we treated you." From Mom. "We were wrong, so wrong." And finally, from Dad. "I never saw it. Your vision, your potential. Can we talk, please?" I typed a single response to all of them. Reservations required. 3-month waiting list, no exceptions. Then I turned back to Chef Liam's brilliant creations, to the empire I'd built while they weren't watching, to the success they'd never seen coming. Later that night, as I walked through my modest apartment, actually the entire top floor of the building, minimally furnished because I preferred it that way, I looked at the framed review from when I'd first bought Lumiere. "Unknown buyer transforms struggling restaurant into culinary empire." Unknown, underestimated, unstoppable. I picked up my phone and sent one final text to my family. Next time you judge someone's worth, remember the person you're looking down on might actually own the ground you're standing on. Then I opened my laptop to review plans for the Tokyo location. After all, success isn't about proving others wrong, it's about continuing to prove yourself right. And sometimes, the sweetest taste isn't in the finest wine or the perfect scallop. It's in the moment they realize they've been dining in your success all along.